I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
עכשיו, תאמר בבקשה לבית המשפט, באיזה צורה אורגנו המשלוחים למזרח? איך זה נקבע? איך אתם ידעתם? איך נפטרו האנשים?
המפקד הודיע להנהלה היהודית של וסטפורק שביום הבא היו צריכים להישלח מספר מסוים, 1,000 או 2,000 או 3,000, וההנהלה היהודית הייתה צריכה לתת שמות האנשים שישלחו, קצת יותר מכל מכסה, כי הייתה כמובן אפשרות של אנשים שימותו בדרך, ולאושוויץ צריך היה תמיד להגיע המספר המדויק. אז אם היה 1,000, היו שולחים 1,020. לפעמים היו אנשים שהיו ברשימה, או היו להם ניירות שהגנו עליהם כביכול שלא ישלחו, ואם לא היה מספיק חומר אנושי, אז ביטלו את החסינות הזאת.
אתם ידעתם שזה למוות אז? אנחנו
לא ידענו שזה יהיה ודאי למוות. אני יכול להגיד, אני ראיתי בהתחלת 43 איזה סקירה רשמית בשביל היודנראט, בשביל מועצת היהודים, ושם היה כתוב שכנראה יש עכשיו בפולין פחות יהודים מאשר לפני כן. כבר ידענו אז שנשלחו הרבה יהודים לפולין.
דוקטור אייכמן, האנשים האלה שהיו ברשימה, מתי הם היו יוצאים?
למחרת בבוקר היו צריכים לבוא הכל אל הכביש הראשי, ושם עמדה רכבת, והיו צריכים להיכנס לזה, ובדרך כלל הרכבת זזה ב-11 בבוקר.
תודה רבה. אייכמן הזמין אליו את מועצת היהודים למלון מג'סטיק והציג בפניה את התוכנית. אחר כך בעקבות זאת החל אוברשטורמפführer אייכמן בדבריו ודיבר תחילה אודות כוכב היהודים. הוא אמר כי על מועצת היהודים לספק את הכוכב, והוא אמר כי צריך לדאוג לכ3 מיליון כוכבים בערך, והוא אומר שבמקרה של החלפת דירה צריך להודיע לו על כך ולקבל היתר ממנו. אם ינהגו היהודים כהלכה, לא יקרה להם כלום. שלב מאוחר יותר בפרוטוקול כתוב שאוברשטורמפführer אייכמן הזכיר כי הוא מתעניין מאוד ביצירות אומנות יהודיות וספריות יהודיות. מאז 34 הוא עוסק בעניינים יהודיים והוא מיטיב לדעת עברית מאיתנו. אמרנו לו כי יש לנו בית לחות יהודי וכי שמורים בו עתיקות וספריות. הוא אמר כי הוא יבוא לבקר. על היהדות להבין כי אין דורשים מדבר בלבד משמעת וסדר. עכשיו מר פרוידיגר, האם אתה נפגשת בבודפשט עם אדולף אייכמן?
כן.
כמה זמן ארכה הישיבה הזאת?
חצי שעה.
והאם הנימה הכללית, אני מבין מדבריך, הייתה מרגיעה?
כן, בהחלט. אני כבר לא כל כך בטוח, זה היה בישיבה הראשונה, בישיבה השנייה, שאמרו שיבטלו את כל ארגוני הקהילות, אם רוצים מקום מרוכז, welche uns gegenüber verantwortlich ist und mit welchen wir verhandeln.
כמה נציגים היו צריכים, כמה חברים היו צריכים להיות באותה ועדה שתהיה אחראית כלפי הגרמנים?
הם אמרו שהרבה 5 איש, לא הרבה.
ראית את הס עושה את זה באושוויץ. חשבת אותו אז לפושע, לרוצח? Als Verbrecher oder nein?
Ich habe ihn bedauert und bemitleidet.
Haben Sie ihn als Verbrecher betrachtet oder nicht?
Meine inneren Gefühle gebe ich nicht preis.
Aber den
das Gefühl, dass ich hier so lange gebraten werde, bis das Rumsteak eben gar ist.
שאלה זאת לא תוכל להתחמק. איך ראית את מפעל ההשמדה שידוע לך אז ואת נושאיו? על זה תצטרך להשיב.
Der Mensch kann in Situationen kommen, die ihn nahe dem Wahnsinn treiben. Und wo es dann nur ein Schrittchen ist, nicht einmal ein Akt der Überlegung, wo er zur Pistole greift. Wie der Mensch darauf reagiert, der Einzelne, das ist dem Einzelnen überlassen. Ich kann nur sagen, wie ich wahrscheinlich und möglicherweise darauf reagiert hätte. Wäre ich mit der Vernichtung beauftragt worden, dann würde ich mich wahrscheinlich erschossen haben um jene Zeit, denke ich. Ich kann das natürlich nicht genau sagen, meine Reaktion, aber nachdem ich meine Reaktion kenne auf das, was mir bekannt war, bin ich der Meinung, dass ich damals dann Schluss gemacht hätte und mich auf diese Art und Weise aus der Angelegenheit entzogen hätte.
ידוע לי שאמצא חייו כשותף לרצח. ידוע לי כי צפוי לי עונש מוות, ואינני מבקש רחמים, כי אין זה מגיע לי. כי אתה מוכן לתלות את עצמך בפומבי כדי לכפר על הפשעים האיומים שאירעו. זה כתוב מפיך בעמוד 361 של הודעתך. אתה מודה על כן שאתה שותף לרצח של מיליונים יהודים.
Von dem rechtlichen Sektor aus gesehen.
שאלתי איננה משפטית. אתה בלבך מוצא את עצמך אשם בשותפות רצח של מיליונים יהודים, כן או לא?
Menschlich schuldig, ja. Weil ich an der Deportierung schuldig bin. Reue ändert nichts. Durch Reue wird niemand wieder lebendig. Reue hat gar keinen Zweck. Reue ist etwas für kleine Kinder. Wichtiger ist, dass man Wege und Mittel sucht, die solche Geschehen künftig ausgeschlossen machen. Und ich habe vor zu bitten, dass man mir gestatten möge, dass ich nach dem Prozess diese Sachen in Form eines Buches frei aushandelnd festlege, und da bin ich bereit, das Kind beim Namen zu nennen, schon als abschreckendes Beispiel für die jetzige und für die kommende Generation. Dann muss ich erklären, dass ich diesen Mord, diese Vernichtung an die Juden für eines der kapitalsten Verbrechen innerhalb der Menschheitsgeschichte betrachte. Ich habe abschließend zu erklären, dass ich persönlich diese gewaltsame Lösung schon damals als nicht zu Recht bestehend betrachtet habe, schon damals als eine grässliche Tat betrachtet habe, zu der ich bedauerlicherweise, gebunden durch Fahneneid, auf meinem Sektor die transporttechnischen Angelegenheiten mitbearbeiten musste und von diesem Eid nicht entbunden wurde. So fühlte ich mich vor meinem Inneren nicht verantwortlich und ich fühlte mich der Schuld ledig. War heilfroh gewesen, dass ich mit der direkten physischen Vernichtung nichts zu tun hatte. Mir reichte allerdings schon der Teil, zu dem ich befohlen war. Für diese Arbeit hinterm Schreibtisch im Dezernat verdaute ich, da habe ich meinen Dienst eben geleistet, wie das befohlen war. Ich habe auch nie irgendwie einen Verweis bekommen, dass ich meine Pflicht nicht erfüllt hätte. Das muss ich auch heute noch sagen.
Set.
That I didn't even notice that.
Yeah, so it was interesting. There's a book there. And as you were preparing the case against Eichmann, how much did the Nuremberg trials and things that occurred there, Jackson's trial and the subsequent trials against the Einsatzgruppen,
Yeah, all right.
was that part of your preparation?
definitely. Also we asked for Robert Kempner. He was visited us, and we showed him everything, and we asked him whether we missed anything.
Yes.
He said, no, on the contrary, we have many things that they didn't have then at
Yes.
the time, because we discovered it in the meantime.
Did you find that?
Are you already recording?
Yes,
now?
yeah.
Oh, I see. I didn't know that.
Oh, it's always good, you know.
I didn't realize. I thought you were just preparing this.
No. Always,
Yes.
we can edit things later. But
Right, okay.
But so therefore, I was, again, curious, because seemingly that book, that's what triggered my eyes, was preparation material.
No, we also quoted it during the trial itself.
Yeah.
It was preparation. During the 9 months that I spent in this prison next to Eichmann, preparing the trial for the prosecution, we of course also read through all the Nuremberg reports, and we also quoted some relevant sections and legal arguments and other things during the trial. Of course, lots of things were different, and lots of things were new. And in the Nuremberg trials, everything having to do with the Holocaust was sort of a marginal point. It was not the central point of the trial. While here, the Eichmann trial dealt with this and all the aspects of the Holocaust.
How did it come to be that you were in a building with Eichmann? You were kind of with him before the trial started.
When Eichmann was brought to Israel, a whole prison was vacated for this. He was kept there, and all the police officers who were in charge of the investigation, they were in this prison. And I was appointed by the Minister of Justice as legal advisor to the police bureau that were in charge of the investigation. Mm-hmm. So for 9 months, I was there. I looked at all the evidence that they assembled. We had a police officer for every country of Europe. And in the evening, I saw all the relevant documents that were assembled by the police officers, and I had to decide what will come into the trial and what will not. And I informed Eichmann that if he had some technical points, until his lawyers came, that if he had some technical points that he wanted to discuss, he could come before me. But I told him that I was not prepared to talk to him about the offenses with which he was charged, because then I would have to be a witness. Yep. And I knew I would be one of the prosecutors. So for 9 months I was in charge actually of the investigation. And then I was one of the prosecutors and also appeared on appeal. So for 2 years I spent with this trial.
At some point you meet him for the first time.
Yes.
What's your reaction?
Well, that's a moment I'll never forget. After I had informed him that he could see me on technical points, but at first he didn't make use of that. And I remember on that particular day, I was reading the autobiography of Rudolf Höss, the commander of Auschwitz.
Right.
And he was hanged by the Poles in 1948, 12 years before Eichmann was caught. Before he was executed, he wrote his biographical notes. And on that day I read that, and I read how he described how they had these days where they had 1,000 Jewish children to kill during the day. And he described the children sometimes used to beg for their lives. And he wrote that when I had to push the children into the gas chambers, my knees were getting a bit wobbly. But then he added, but I always afterwards felt ashamed of this weakness of mine after I talked to Adolph Eichmann, to Obersturmbannführer Adolph Eichmann, because Eichmann explained to me that it's especially the children who have to be killed first. He says, because where is the logic that you kill a generation of older people and you leave alive a generation of possible avengers who can afterwards create that race again? And that maybe is not devoid of some macabre kind of logic, but 10 minutes after I read that, they told me that Eichmann wants to see me. And he came in and I heard his steps, and then he was sitting opposite me like you're sitting now. I must admit it was a bit difficult to keep a poker face at that particular moment.
Yes.
That was my first meeting with him.
did you, just though you only met him on a few times perhaps individually, did you have a sense of his character? What made you
well, I had a sense of his character, not so much from that. Because these were rather sort of formal meetings. He discussed the question of who would be, how he could appoint lawyers and his connection with his family. That not, but I could see from all the documents and from his reactions, he was, of course, I didn't question him myself because, again, and I would have to be a witness, I was a police officer, but in the evening, every evening, I heard the tape recording of his testimony, and I advised the police officer what questions to put to him next day. So I could realize. I usually refrain from analyzing people and defining that they're only something, only a murderer, only a robot, or only a bureaucrat, or only a Nazi. People are never only something. People are a combination. People also pass through stages of development. I had a feeling that happened to Eichmann. At first he thought it was good to be an expert on Jewish matters because good for his career. Then when you kill innocent people every day, you must either be somehow crazy, which he was not medically. But with him, you could see that during the war years, they developed a complete obsession with him, a complete identification with his criminal scheme, where he then became finally, towards the end of the war, that was the only thing he cared about. And he told his friends towards the end of the war, I know the war is lost, but I'm still going to win my war. And then he went to Auschwitz to get the death rate increased from 10,000 a day to 12,000 a day. When the German generals were clamoring for reinforcement, for ammunition, he, by all kinds of means, managed to get priority for his death rates. And he must have known that he was actually harming Germany's war effort by doing that. But that was then became, as I say, complete identification with this criminal scheme.
What was his relationship with Rudolf Höss? I know they're professional relationship, but did he have any personal?
Well, as far as I know, Rudolf Höss was very critical in his testimony. He not only didn't tell about that, but he also said that Eichmann told him that he would be delighted to remember that he was responsible for the murder of millions of people. And so he, when we showed this to him during the trial and also during the investigation, he was critical of Höss. He said, well, I don't know why Höss said these things. I don't remember having said all these things and so on. So he was not, he didn't speak in a very friendly manner about Höss. But from Höss's biography, before he was executed, we could see that he was on very special terms with him.
How much of the case was jurisdictional? Obviously, the extradition did not occur. There was no request from Argentina to turn him over. It was the army had kind of grabbed him.
Yeah.
Did his counsel talk a lot about just the jurisdiction?
Oh, yes. There were lots of... we imagined one of the first things I did, and I was in charge of preparing the case, that I thought of all the legal points,
right,
jurisdictional points, that I thought that the defense could and would raise, and they did, in fact, raise all these points, some other points. There was the question of the retroactivity of the law, that he was charged under our law in 1950. I mean, we had a law 10 years before he was caught, in 1950, but still many years after the offenses occurred in the 30s and the 40s. The same argument was raised in the Nuremberg trials. Mm-hmm. Actually, it was rejected there. And I showed, I prepared it, and we showed the court afterwards, that this question of retroactivity is not a legal point, it's a question of justice. And you don't have to be a lawyer in order to understand that really if someone does something which is completely legal, and then after a few months retroactively it's made illegal, then to punish him, that doesn't look just. But that doesn't refer to the situation here. When we made this law under which it was a person could be put on trial for murdering innocent men, women and children, we didn't create a new norm. That was illegal under German law, it was illegal under SS law. Everyone knew, and they tried to hide it before the German people. So if you speak of justice, the fact that after the war, for the Nuremberg trials, under the Charter, and for in all the other European countries, and in Israel, we had laws with retroactive effect to enable people to stand trial for such atrocities, that from the point of view of justice, it's not only forbidden from the point of view of justice, but on the contrary, justice demanded that a forum should be created to put people like that on trial. That was that. Then there was the question of the victim, that we are the country of the victims, the Jewish victim, that therefore it's not, justice doesn't appear to be done if a court representing the victim judges a man who harmed it, which also is nonsense, because the whole idea of the criminal law is that the court representing a community which is harmed puts a man on trial. As I said during the trial, that if in Turkey someone is found who committed treason against England, it's not a Turkish court that will judge him, but an English court if they manage to get hold of him. And so also from that point of view, and as I've often mentioned, I never forget the first moment of this trial, when these judges came into the courtroom with the Israeli emblem behind them. And that man whose only object in life had been to destroy that people. And he got up and stood to attention before an Israeli court. I found the importance of the creation of the State of Israel somehow more than any preceding moment or any other occasion that had occurred. And some people said, yes, but here for Israel, the people have emotions. I said, any judge who can hear things like that and does not feel any emotions, I think he's not fit to be a judge. Of course, you have to be objective. No one said that the Israeli court did not give him every possibility to defend himself, and that it was not objective. Of course, they had to do that. And the judges were very strict with us. Actually, they didn't permit us to bring one single piece of evidence which was not relevant to the trial. Only that here what helped us, if we wanted to show, of course, what happened during the Holocaust, but what helped us was that the accused was Eichmann, because he was in charge of every aspect of that. And therefore, really, everything was really relevant. Or even if we charged him, sometimes people say, yes, but he wasn't present at all the killings and the death camps, and you showed what happened there. Of course we did, because if we charged him with to be an accomplice to murder, then of course we have to show what he did in order to send people to the death camps. But we have to show also that people were in fact killed. That's part of the legal evidence. So therefore all this was relevant evidence, and we managed of course to do that. Another legal point was the question of the kidnapping. The fact people said is, the defense said that he was kidnapped illegally from the Argentine, and that therefore the court should not judge him. Well, here we relied not on totalitarian countries, but we relied on judgments from America and from England. You know, it happens in America very often that someone commits a crime in one state, he escapes to another state, and the sheriff catches him in the other state and brings him back illegally, actually. Absolutely. So that was argued, and there were a number of cases by the American Supreme Court, where they held that if someone does that illegally, he can perhaps be put on trial, but that does not affect the jurisdiction of the court of the country where the crime was committed, where they actually have a right to judge it. And as Israel legally, as an international crime, had the right to judge him, therefore this did not harm the jurisdiction of the Israeli court.
Did the Israeli court take judicial notice of any of the evidence that was put into evidence at the Nuremberg trial, or did you have to reintroduce that there at the Israeli trial?
Well, of course we had to introduce, we could not take anything taken in the Nuremberg trials. The judges had the right to look at this, but we did not rely only on that. Right. By the way, Mr. Robert Kempner, who was present in Nuremberg, he visited us. We asked him to come to Israel, and I showed him at the end of our investigation I showed him all he had, and I asked him whether he thought that they had anything at the Nuremberg trials that we missed, and that he felt that we should complete. He said he actually put our minds at rest, and he said that all the important points were there. And then, of course, we had also found, in the meantime, additional evidence, because we had a lot of cooperation from American sources and also from German sources. We received all the documents from all the ministries of the government of Germany, and that also helped us a lot.
Eichmann was represented by, is this Robert Servatius?
Servatius, yes, and another young lawyer, Dieter Westenbuch. He was a young, the two of them represented him, yes.
Did you get any sense that they were getting help from other agencies, governments, any assistance that they were getting as defense counsel?
What kind of assistance?
Well,
evidence?
Evidence, yeah.
We didn't interfere with that. Of course, I imagine that, I'm sure that Servatius got a lot of information from Germany, from German sources. And that, of course, was his complete right. Not only that, but that was interesting. I mean, I don't deserve any credit for this. I did this in every criminal case. But sometimes when I came across some documents that I thought might be of interest for the defense, I sent it to the defense counsel. And he showed it to Eichmann. And he told me afterwards, and Eichmann said, where did you get this from? And he said, the prosecutor gave it because he thought it might be interesting. He said he almost fainted. The fact that how come that the prosecutor in Israel would try to help the defense for anything that he thought might be relevant. But anyway, that's something that we did in every criminal case, so we did it in this case as well.
As the actual, for the camera, the case, the prosecution portion lasted how long of the case? How long did you put on your prosecution case?
Well, in the trial itself, the trial took 3 months. And I don't remember this, but of course the defense case, of course, relied to a larger extent on Eichmann's testimony. And he spoke for a couple of days. Not only that, but also there were some Nazi witnesses, people who couldn't come to Israel because they were afraid to be to stand trial themselves. But we enabled these people to be questioned before a German court, and there was a representative of the prosecution and the defense who were present there. So there was full evidence of any witness that could have been of assistance to the defense, and this was headed into court in Israel. So that's part of the defense system.
Eichmann, when he was going through his 2 days worth of testimony, what surprised you the most? What position did he take, say, I didn't expect that?
Well, I mean, one of the things that, for instance, I prepared a documentary film. We wanted to show that, not too long. I mean, for 3 days and 3 nights, I saw all the documentary films that existed from any country, in Russia and Czechoslovakia, Poland, Germany, and so on. And I picked about 45 minutes. Pictures, of course, of Auschwitz and and Bergen-Belsen and the corpses and the gas chambers and so on. And out of fairness to the accused, before we put it into court, I wanted him to see it and his lawyer. So in the evening, before we put it into court, we showed it to the judges. We showed it only to him and to his colleagues. There were some journalists present in the courtroom. Now, I knew the film, so I didn't look at the film. I looked at him.
Yes.
I wanted to see how he would react to this. So he was completely stoical, didn't react at all when he saw the most gruesome pictures. But then he spoke in a very excited manner to his warden, who stood next to him. So after it was over, I called the warden. I said, tell me, why was he suddenly so excited? He said, yes, he said that he had been promised that he would never be taken into the courtroom unless he wears his dark blue suit. And here they're taking him out in his gray suit. And he saw some other people present. And they shouldn't promise him a thing like this if they can't keep it. And he has to protest violently that they took him out in his gray suit instead of his blue suit. That was the only thing that worried him when he saw. I mean, this was something that was rather, came as a little bit of a surprise. Apart from that, he said during his trial that he thought that this was the one of the most capital crimes committed in history. So I was asked during the trial and afterwards if I thought that he meant this sincerely. Now, from the point of view of the punishment, that might have been of some importance. So I said, I'm sure that this was mere lip service toward the outside. So I was asked, why do you say that? And I said, I could imagine, even a man like that, that his eyes could be opened at the end of the war in 1961 when he stood trial. I don't denounce the possibility that he could change his mind, that he could really feel some kind of remorse. But here we had proof that in 1956, when he was in the Argentine, he was visited by a Dutch journalist called Dassen, and that man took his life story, sort of life insurance for his family after his death. But when Eichmann was caught, he gave it to a magazine, and there we got the transcript with Eichmann's corrections in his handwriting, so clearly. So there he describes the death trains that he saw. They were wonderful to watch. And then this Dutchman asked him, tell me, Mr. Eichmann, do you feel sorry sometimes for what you've done? He said, yes, I feel sorry for one thing, that I wasn't hard enough, that I wasn't tough enough, that I didn't fight these damn interventionists enough. And now you see the result, the creation of the State of Israel and the re-emergence of that people there. So I said, if he said that in 1956, 11 years after the war, and now 5 years later in 1961, when he's speaking, when he's fighting for his life, he suddenly speaks of the gravest crime in history, I think I'm justified to be a bit skeptical about the weight and the truthfulness of such a remark. But apart from that, there was nothing very, very surprising. It was to be expected. He couldn't deny that, all the other leaders in the Gestapo were changed by rotation. The only one was kept all during the war. And that was he in the Jewish department. And then you could see this, that then he was really, in a way, became more fanatical than his superior officers, because for them, of course Hitler and Himmler were more guilty because they were the originators of the idea. He only was responsible for carrying out the whole scheme. But for Hitler and with Himmler, there were other things, like the political situation, the military situation, which was as important, perhaps more important, than killing every last Jew. For Eichmann, it was only that. So we had proof, and we brought that proof, that he countermanded Hitler's orders when he thought it might mean the saving of a few Jews, you see. So that was also very typical for him.
In fact, I was supposed to ask you of how Eichmann overrode a general of the German army who unsuccessfully wanted to spare the life of one Jewish scientist, a radar expert.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, yes. Yes. That was also typical for him. And also, during the preparation of the trial, we had sleepless nights when, I had this proof that there were always attempts to save a Jew from here or from there or somewhere. Now, the one that you mentioned, the representative of the police who dealt with France, he wrote me a letter that was written by the commander of Paris, of the German army. And he wrote to Eichmann that there was a Jewish professor, Professor Weiss, an expert on radar, and that was very important for the German army to examine him, to examine his patents, and to use it for the German army. He insists that this man should not be deported, he and his wife. So, it always took a few days until I got the reply, because there were hundreds of other documents in between in these files. It was all it was chronological. So then the police officer came. I dreamt then at the night that this man was saved.
Yeah.
And then the police officer brought me the reply of Eichmann, where he said, out of question of principle, I cannot possibly agree. A few days later, another note, the German general had called Eichmann by telephone, and he said, how dare you countermand an order? I am a general of the army. And he answered, and I am an Obersturmbannführer of the SS, and I don't care what rank you have in the army. A few days later, Eichmann writes to him, I have examined the thing further, and I've seen that the patents of this Jew Weiss have already been taken over by the German army. Therefore, I see no reason even to postpone for one more day the deportation of this Jew, and then they note that this was carried out. Then I handed in all the documents during the trial, and a few days later, my secretary came to me and said, there's a young lady outside wants to see you. I said, who's that? Alisa Weiss? I don't know what. So they brought her in, and she said, I'm the daughter of this Professor Weiss, and I was a baby when they took my parents away. And my parents saw that they were coming, so they sent me to neighbors. And the neighbors kept me and then sent me to America. And there in America, I read that you put in these documents about Eichmann. Now, not only didn't I know my parents, but I haven't got even a picture of what they looked like. Could you possibly give me some advice how I can get a picture of him and so on? I mean, you know, when I think of these, some of the traumatic things that remember the memory, that I thought then a few days later, there were some Dutch Jewish fascists, belonged to the fascist party. There were 12 people like that. And the leader of the fascist party wrote to Eichmann that these people are loyal members of the fascist party, and he insists they should not be deported. It might be demoralizing for all the other party members if they are sent away, because, and he, in order to make it more appropriate, he said to Eichmann, these people might also do intelligence work inside the Jewish community. It might help you. Then the answer of Eichmann, question of principle, I cannot possibly agree. And he added, if you think it will be demoralizing to send them today, let's send them in a few weeks. By then, people will have got used to the deportations in such a way that it won't make any more. I mean, things incredible. A young woman was caught in Estonia, and she was the widow of a high Italian officer who was killed in the fighting and was known all over Italy for his bravery and courage. So the Italian consul wrote to Eichmann that here there is a woman, she is a widow of this man, and everyone knows her and loves her because she's a widow of this brave officer. So the Italian government wants her to be sent back to Italy. Now here I thought again, Italy, the ally of Germany. Yeah. And here this man fought in the fight together with Germany. So here this one woman, so Eichmann insisted, and he saw to it that this woman was deported to Auschwitz and killed there. I mean, this is part of his character. That's why they kept him there as the only person who was in charge of a Gestapo department, and was not changed.
Today we're at this conference, genocide conference. You've listened a little bit about the legacy of the Nuremberg trial. What's the legacy of the Eichmann trial?
Well, there are many legacies. It's a legacy in a way is similar to trials. It's in many fields. It showed our young people, for instance. You know, some of our young people were ashamed. They didn't want to hear about the Holocaust, because a young Israeli can understand that you can be killed fighting, but not that you can be slaughtered, you see. So here we showed that how people were misled by the German authorities, and how whether they were gypsies or Russian commissars, it was always the same, that defense was made impossible. And then when the people in the Jewish ghetto, Warsaw, for instance, when they knew that death was waiting for them, the bravery, the courage which they fought to the last man, so there was no reason to be ashamed, on the contrary, to be proud. And that caused a great upheaval inside our young people there. They suddenly got interested in history of European Jewry, wanted to visit Poland and so on. That was the thing. And another thing was in Germany. There was a huge change. There started a chain reaction of cases against Nazi criminals after the Eichmann trial, which gives us now information about people, the denials of Nazi guilt. That was one of the things. And then, of course, the deterrent effect for people who are in a situation where they can carry out crimes like that they should know that if they do that, then even after 15 years, they can still be caught and investigated and tried. So that was one of the things that I think that the trial showed us. In addition to the feeling that some kind of justice was done, you can't have to complete justice to someone who murdered 6 million people, but at least in the most democratic way possible, that was achieved.
This is great. I know we're waiting to hear Whitney Harris, and we're going to take our seats, but thank you for taking some special time. I really appreciate it. I look forward to getting you over to our United States again and maybe to the Robert Jackson Center.
Well, glad to have seen you.